What's up, guys? Thanks so much for clicking on the video. My name is Leah, and let's recap and review Real Housewives of Miami. This is season 7, episode, I don't know, but part 1 of the reunion. I know I'm late, but life has been lifing. But we here now, so let's get into the review. So y'all know sometimes before we get in to the review, we get a little spicy just a little bit. Well, I did a standalone spicy corner. I'll put the thumbnail on the screen. Please check it out if you are interested in all things about Guerdy, Adriana, both of them like addressing what happened at the part 1 of the reunion, but also I read Todd's lawsuit or the TMZ article that came out about him suing Bravo. So if you're interested in that, please check out the link in the description box below. All right, y'all, so let's get into this review. So the episode opens up and we see all the women are in New York. I told you guys in one of my spicy corners who were my best dressed, but I'll tell you again, Marisol was first for me. I thought she looked the best out of everybody. Lisa was next, and then Alexia and Adriana they were tied for 3rd place. Okay, worst dress was Stephanie, because I didn't understand the construct. I said, girl, who told you to put fringe on a crop topped blazer? No, I don't like it. I don't like it. And mind you, the outfit weighed 25 pounds. She said that when she explained her outfit and her inspiration for the reunion. A mess, okay? So we see the women getting their hair and makeup done. We actually see that Adriana brought Basquiat, and I said, girl, she already on her stunts and shows already. So we see Lisa in her dressing room saying, I'm cool as a cucumber because I have the truth on my side, girl. I know I'm good. We then see Larsa in the dressing room with her boyfriend, Jeff, and she's just like, I don't keep receipts. Like, my phone is full of pictures of my feet, my family, my man. Like, I'm not in 1st grade, but girl, this is the reunion and your job is to bring the receipts. So get with the program, Larsa. Then we see Julia. Julia, you can tell, is nervous in the dressing room. Like, you can see it in her face that she is really not prepared, and the way that people have been treating her online has been weighing on her heavily. So she's like, a lot of the comments have been really harsh towards me and my family. And they actually flash across the screen what people have been saying. This is why y'all, we got to be careful what we say online, because I said, oh, girl. So you have one person saying Julia needs to be deported back to Russia for this. I said, y'all, we can't be xenophobic. We can't do that. Then another person said Julia needs to be dragged literally and figuratively. And then they go, oops. And I said, oh, y'all. Then another person said, I 100% hate this, bitch. And then the last comment was, Julia is ruining the show. I said, oh, girl. My thing about it is, well, let me continue, and then I'll give y'all my thoughts. So Julia ends up saying, I'm not weak, I'm just a sensitive person. And the hairdresser was like, of course, girl, you're a Cancer. Then we see Adriana in Guerdy's room. We see Russell in the back while Guerdy's getting her makeup done. And she's like, how you doing? You ready for the reunion? And Guerdy's like, girl, I'm ready for whatever. And Adriana's like, yes, I'm ready for the battlefield as well. We then get back to Julia. Julia is now crying, where she's like, I don't have Martina here with me. She's with the boys. Then next thing you know, she's just, I want. And then you end up seeing Alexia and Marisol come into the dressing room, and they're like, girl, what's going on? What's going on? And she was like, I just wanted you. I said, girl, what is happening? What is happening, Julia? I just don't understand how Julia did not think people were going to be on her neck. I don't get it. Your storyline did not leave any room for people to be like endearing towards you. You may have thought that, adopting those 2 little boys was going to like open up the public to you, but honestly, it just left a even badder taste in a lot of people's mouth, especially with the way that you treat Guerdy and the way that Martina speaks about Black women online. Like, let's keep it a buck. Girl, you didn't really have a legitimate issue with Guerdy. When people asked you what your problem was, and when Guerdy asked you what the problem was, you could not articulate yourself as to what the root cause of your issues were with with her. Then when she was trying to explain herself, you threw a drink on her, and then you berated her. And then when y'all had a sit down together, you pretty much were like trying to bully her or like pressure her into accepting your apology. Okay. Then we have the way that you treat Adriana. You've known that lady since you've known her longer than that, but we have known that you have known of her since season 4. Like, y'all have been friends and locked in for years. And then now we're at season 7 and you're totally discarding her. Then we find out that your children are not okay. Your biological children are not okay with this adoption. And it's starting to feel like you are not a present parent and you're trying to use these kids to start all over. Okay. And then in this reunion, we find out that you changed their names. And let's keep it a buck. White people changing black children's names has a very strong and dark cultural history. So I don't know what you thought was going to happen here. I don't know. And it also gives that you felt like you was going to have this white savior complex because you adopted them 2 little black kids. It's 2025. That would have maybe have worked back in 2000 and I would say the early, like 2010s, but girl, no. Not now. Definitely not now, okay? So we see Andy going to the girls' rooms, trying to check on them, seeing like, what's the temperature? How are you feeling? Then we see the girls get on stage and, everyone seems for the most part in good spirits. I actually like the way that the stage is set up this season because even though they're all like on the same like sofas, there's still room between them. I tell y'all this all the time. I wish they would go back to the way that they had them seated during the pandemic because I felt like we got better responses and reactions when the women were sitting by themselves because they felt safe and comfortable in their little chair. So I feel like this kind of gives that same vibe, and I hope other reunions start doing the same because I hate when they all huddle up together, okay? So everybody's impressed that Lisa is on the stage before Larsa and Adriana, and I was too, because I'm like, okay, Lisa, I guess what she said about implementing timers to make sure that she gets out and does like arrive to situations early or on time is actually working for her. So kudos to Lisa. We then see Adriana bring Bosky out on stage. And like I said, stunts and shows. She's like, he's my emotional support animal. And then production said, we don't care. Get that dog off stage. Because Andy ends up telling her, girl, the pooch can't be on set. And I'm glad that they told her, no, ma'am. Because in my mind, that's negligent to me. Because it's one thing to have an actual service animal, okay? Like, I get it. Some people do need their animals to be with them 24/7, but Adriana only brought Bosky out there because she wanted to have a moment. There was no need to have that dog there who was going to be fidgeting and moving, maybe might pee on themselves or like barks at people. That's a hazard. Also, who's going to be taking care of that dog while you're on stage for like 10 or 9 hours? Like, did you already tell the hair and makeup staff, like, I need y'all to watch my dog? Who's going to be feeding him? Who's going to take him out to go use the bathroom? Who's going to be making sure he's okay? Because if you did not pay them people extra, you wrong for that. And if you automatically assume production was going to take care of him, you foul for that as well, because that is not their job, Adriana. Like I said, I knew when I saw that dog, stunts and shows. So they start off the reunion with them taking tequila shots. Andy ends up asking Steph, what's the vibe you going to be on? We know how nautical Steph is. She's cool as a cucumber, but how are you going to be for the reunion? She was like, I'm going to be cool as a cucumber, but I am definitely going to voice my opinion. Mind you, Stephanie shouldn't have been first chair because she gave nothing in this first part. I didn't get why she was there. I didn't get why. Other than she got beef with Alexia. And that's it, okay? So they end up asking Larsa about Jeff, and she was like, we see, Andy's like, we see that you brought your boyfriend. And she was like, well, yeah, I feel like everyone has met him. Then Andy brings up how, he said that y'all were going to be married within a year. And she was like, well, yeah, I think we are. They're not getting married. Larsa, just suck the youth out of him and find a new man, because you're not marrying him. You're not. So then they asked Kiki about living in the show Macondo, and her saying, well, I didn't even know that Stephanie was going to be a part of the show before I looked at the condo. And she was just like, I need a discount, okay? Half off. So then they asked Julia about Martina and the boys, and if the boys are interested in tennis. And she's like, yeah. Adriana gifted the oldest child a racket, and then Martina bought the youngest son a racket. And now they, like, play with the ball up against the wall. She was like, that's how Martina learned. So yeah, they're definitely into it. Then Andy ends up asking Lisa, are you taking notes tonight? And she's like, I'm always taking notes. And everyone kind of laughs it off. We find out that Lisa rang the opening bell at NASADA. I don't know what that is, but congrats to her, And then they bring up Guerdy ringing the bell at the New York Stock Exchange. And, she was very happy for that as well. So then Andy ends up asking Alexia, so how are you and Todd? You told me it changed by the minute, but how are things going with you guys? And she's like, we're not together. She was like, I've cut zero contact with him. I haven't spoken to him. And you have Marisol being like, thank God. Then you see Alexia say, I've blocked him on all social media and on my phone. And Andy was like, well, the divorce is final, right? And she was like, yes, it's final. And he was like, did you change your name? She was like, legally, my name is Alexia Nepola, but on all of my social media, I dropped the name. And she was like, I never really identified with the name. That's a lie, because during the season, girl, you said, girl, I'm Alexia Nepola. Now, if you did not identify with the name, you wouldn't have said it like that. You just wouldn't. You know what I mean? You wouldn't say it like that. So Alexia basically says that, it just didn't resonate with me. And then Marisol chiming in like a best friend, girl, it didn't resonate with me either. And then she talked about how Todd would fight with her before the reunion. Like, he would literally start an argument with her and then tell her that the women on the stage weren't her friends. They don't really care about her. Why are you doing this show? Really trying to berate and belittle her. So then Marisol chimes in, and she basically says that he would start fights with her before the reunion. Like, basically pick a fight with her. I would ask her, how are you and Todd doing? And she was like, he hasn't spoken to me in 2 days. Like, and everyone else is like, dang, like, he really played in your face like that? And she was like, he would abandon her before the reunion all the time. And Marisol says that's really hard because, the reunions are tough. It is tough. And you always want support from the people behind you. So it is what it is. So then Andy ends up asking Marisol, do you regret any of the things that you have ever said? And she was like, no, I don't regret what I said about Todd or Lenny. and Lisa laughs, and she's like, I've been burned by men before, so like my emotions really get into it with my girls. So then they flash back to when not Alexia, but when Marisol was talking about Todd and Alexia's relationship, how she was like, he wasn't really kind to her, he wasn't really good to her, and he would always like constantly pick at her and make her feel less than. And so Alexia says, Todd saw the show and he really wasn't happy with what Marisol said. And then Marisol was like, yeah, he blocked me and Steve and blocked a couple of my other friends. So it is what it is. So then you hear Lisa said, girl, very emotional man, like very emotional. Like she got the ick from that. And so Alexia says, at this point, I'm just happy where I'm at. They actually bring up something that we talked about in the spicy corner, where Todd was responding to somebody talking about Alexia, where it says, the wife of a friend is saying she is driving his fake car, living in a fake apartment. What should you do? And Todd said, that depends. Does she bring anything to the table in the relationship, or is she just there to get things? So then Alexia was like, well, we all know Todd likes to be on social media and make his videos and things of that nature. But she was like, obviously, I wasn't there for the money. I was there because I loved him. And at this point in my life, I'm getting my power back and I don't want to be with him anymore. So then they asked Alexia, was the party really about Todd? And she finally cops to it. And she said, yes, the narcissist party was about Todd. And Stephanie was like, see, finally. Girl, we all knew the party was about Todd. So then Andy ends up asking her, are you going to like date again? And she says this phrase in Spanish called one nail drives out another. Basically saying, girl, I need to get up under another man and I'll be fine. I just need some ass. That's what she basically said. So it's now time to really get into the reunion and start talking about the feuds. I'm going to be honest, I was actually surprised that they started talking about Julia and Guerdy's situation. I thought based off of the trailer that wouldn't be something we touched upon until the second part of the reunion. But we get into it. Andy ends up asking or telling Guerdy, the fans love seeing you and Nicole together, like, during the season. And he's like, do you have plans to hang out with her here soon? And she's like, yeah, we're about to meet up after all of this. And then Andy ends up asking Guerdy, do you think your issues with Julia would have been different if Nicole was still here? And Guerdy was like, no, my issues with Julia would have been handled differently if Julia would have just picked up the phone and called me and acted like an adult. And I agree wholeheartedly, okay? But I do think their issues would have been different with Nicole. I do not think Julia would have shown her ass the way she did this season if Nicole was still there. And the reason why I say that is when you look at this group, there's already two cliques within the group. And you had the new girls and you had the OGs. The OGs group was Alexia, Marisol, Larsa, Kiki, and Lisa. And I would say Kiki and Lisa were like in the middle, but they normally leaned onto the OGs group. And then the new girls group was Adriana, what's her name? Guerdy, Nicole, and Julia. But in those prospective groups, you had two girls who were the queen bees of that group. Nicole was the queen bee of the new girls group, and Alexia is the queen bee of the old girls group. And when Nicole left, I think this gave Julia, who is a social climber, the opportunity to hitch her wagon to a bigger fish. People like Julia only go where they see there's an alpha there. It kind of reminds me of the Minions. If you've seen the Minions movie, how they constantly in the opening credits of the movie were following around the apex predator. It started off with, I think it was the T-Rex, then it was Man, then it was Dracula, then you had Napoleon and all this stuff. It's like whoever was the apex predator or the apex of the villain, that is who the Minions follow. And that to me is how Julia is operating. She saw that the main girl, because as much as Nicole would work my nerves, I still knew she was that girl on this show. She had the money, the intellect, she was cute, she had the man, she had the children. She was that girl on this show. When she, like her leaving created a power vacuum for Julia, and she had to find somebody to fill it, and it wasn't going to be Adriana, and it was Marisol and Alexia, and more so Alexia, that filled that spot for her. So the conversation continues with Andy basically saying, we got a lot of people who were upset with the lack of reaction from the women with the whole drink toss situation. And you can tell that Julia is ashamed of her behavior because she didn't even look at the video. Her head was down the whole entire time. And everybody was like, dang, especially people who weren't there when they saw it again. And so Alexia ends up saying, reliving that and rewatching this, she was like, I wish I would have said something in that moment. She goes on to say, what Julia did was not okay and it was not right. She said, I feel like we were just still in shock at the moment and there was no excuse why we did not stick up for Guerdy. And she was like, and sometimes things just happen. Guerdy is listening to Alexia like, girl, what? And then Larsa chimes in and she says, I feel like we all didn't like what happened. Larsa says in that moment, we all told Julia what she did was not okay. Like, you can't do that. And when she threw the drink in Guerdy's direction, we all got wet. So then Guerdy was like, so you're confirming that she intended to throw the drink at me? And Lisa chimes in and was like, yes, she threw it right towards her. And Alexia ends up saying, well, girl, you weren't there. And I'm like, Alexia, girl, hush, because she just watched the video and she saw what she saw with her eyes. Like, what are we talking about? So Larsa ends up saying, I'm just saying we should have we all should have done more in that moment. But Guerdy, you didn't do anything when Adriana threw a glass at me. And Adriana was like, I never threw a glass at you. So then they flash back, and I think this was season 5 when they all, I think they went to the Bahamas or maybe Jamaica. But when Adriana and Larsa were getting into it and they were down at the beach eating dinner and Adriana threw a drink across the way, it didn't look like it was going towards Larsa, but she still threw the drink. And that's when she had them horrible braids. Oh, girl, what is it? The braids? Horrible braids. So then, like I said, Adriana was like, girl, I did not throw a drink at you. So then you hear Guerdy say, this is deflection. Like, this is legit deflection. So then Andy ends up asking Guerdy, do you accept Alexia's apology? And Guerdy was like, that was not an apology. And Alexia's like, girl, what? What do you mean? And so Guerdy was like, look, I came here to this reunion to listen and not speak too much. And so Alexia is like, well, Guerdy, I'm admitting that like we should have did more for you. But that's not an apology. You did not say I'm sorry. You did not say I apologize. You're just acknowledging that in that moment your behavior was not the best because you did not stick up for her. Like, the acknowledgement is great, but if you would have finished that off with I'm sorry, it would have been better. So then Guerdy is just like, it wasn't like she was like, okay, thank you. So I guess Guerdy is taking it as an apology because she ends up saying thank you. So then Alexia is like, she was like, we're allowed to all make mistakes, Guerdy. But then she goes on to say, but let's be honest, you felt violated in that moment and you had the right to feel violated in that moment. But there have been different situations where we all have had certain things thrown at us and nobody has really reacted. And Alexia says, when Larsa, when Adriana threw the drink at Larsa, you didn't do anything. When Kiki threw the juice box at Lisa in Mexico, none of us really did anything. And they flash back to that, but I'm going to be honest. Lisa deserved that juice box being thrown at her. She was doing too much, even though you shouldn't throw things because you're an adult. But, but you do hear what's her name, Guerdy in that moment say, Kiki, no, we shouldn't throw things. But Kiki was like, then why she standing up? Yeah, like, don't stand up because that kind of signifies you want to fight. And so then Marisol jumps in and she was like, and when Julia tried to throw an ice bucket at me, you didn't really do anything. And so the conversation continues on, and Guerdy was like, girl, play the footage. I did help. No, you didn't, girl. You didn't. They show the footage of Julia picking up an ice bucket and really trying to throw it on Marisol. Guerdy is like walking away, and Kiki is the one that grabs them saying, we're not getting physical. We're not doing that. And production has an arrow following Guerdy as she does not do anything. So the conversation continues with Alexia saying, we've all have been in situations where people have thrown things and we have not liked it, and you have every right to be upset. So then Andy ends up asking Kiki, so how do you feel about this? And Kiki says, me and Guerdy were good, and even at the event, I stood up for you like a friend. I did what somebody I would want someone to do for me. And granted, you didn't feel that way, but that's how I felt. And so they flash back to when the water thing happened and Kiki was trying to pull Guerdy away and telling her, like, girl, we should leave. And then Kiki says, and then that's where things get tricky because I'm being called a racist online and I'm getting sent all sorts of threats. And then Guerdy was like, you're a racist? And Kiki's like, girl, that's what the whole internet is saying about me. And she was like, I thought by removing you and myself, we would be okay. But then you are saying that by me trying to remove you, I'm making it seem like you're the angry black woman. And they do show a article that was written up that Guerdy, talked about, feeling as though Kiki pulling her away made her seem like the angry black woman. And I told y'all that I agreed with Kiki in that moment. Like, I wouldn't have stayed at the party. I would have legit left. And then it further proved that I was right because after the drink toss happened, we end up seeing footage of the women chastising Guerdy after the drink got thrown on her. So I was like, you should have left with Kiki. Like, you never stay where you're not wanted, and you never let somebody kick you out of a place more than once. That's what I've been told, and that's what I believe. So Kiki is like, girl, you're online talking about FAFO and things of that nature. And if you don't know what that means, F around and find out. And she was like, I thought everything was fine. So then I think it was Alexia that chimes in and says, girl, the second half of the season, you and Julia were okay. And then you go on this press tour, making it seem like y'all are not okay. And they do show video of not video, but a reality blurb article about Guerdy saying that she feels like she's being iced out by her cast members. So then Guerdy ends up saying, give me an example of where I use my social media or caused a social media war. And they were like, Guerdy, you were talking after every episode. And I talked about this in my spicy corner because you then hear Marisol say, fanning the flames. I felt two ways of this. On one hand, I don't think Guerdy was wrong for voicing her opinions and her feelings about these women and about how she felt like watching the season back. She has every right to do that. But then on the other hand, I can get what the other women are talking about, where it's like, girl, you were cool with her the latter half of the season. On top of that, you see that everyone is throwing hate our way. Why would you fan the flames? And also, we've never seen Guerdy be this vocal, even in press conferences, not press conferences, but we've never seen her be this vocal in interviews, as well as we've never seen her be this way online. And I've been reviewing this show since season 4 and doing spicy corners for that long, to be honest. So I'm just kind of like, I get what they're saying, but I also feel like it is not Guerdy's job to chastise everybody that's coming at y'all. If y'all would have reacted better, this wouldn't be the case. But I can understand their feelings of being like, dang, girl, like you already see us getting beat up online. Stop adding to it, you know? So they also need to point out that it was Julia who started with Guerdy when it came to the whole text message situation. She's the one that made that long paragraph statement trying to get ahead of, you know, what was coming her way. And then Guerdy decided to react by posting a text message conversation. So Guerdy was just like, explain to me where I messed up at. So then Alexia was like, you were in a good place with Julia. So then Andy ends up saying, well, maybe she was just reacting in real time to what was being aired, and she got re-triggered by what was happening. So as the conversation goes on, Guerdy was like, I'm glad, Alexia, you said that you wish you would have done more, because you did do more. And I hope they run the tape, because she was like, no one got me a towel. No one asked me if I was okay. No one went to go get security. You know, it is what it is. So then Larsa said, girl, when Adriana threw a drink at me, no one got me a towel either. And so next thing you know, Guerdy is like, you guys verbally hazed me. And they do show after 11 minutes of after the drink was thrown at her, they were all telling her, girl, how does it feel to put your eggs in one basket? And Larsa's like, Guerdy's like, what are y'all talking about? And Larsa's like, Nicole, you were only friends with Nicole, and now you're disconnected from the group. And that is basically your fault. Now, to me, Nicole doesn't have anything to do with this right here. But I will say a lot of housewives fall into this trap when it comes to making friends with certain women on this show, where they kind of insulate themselves and then they don't become friends with other people. And then when that person leaves the show, now it's them kind of starting at ground zero to rebuild their friendships with everybody else on the show, or make friendships with everybody else on the show. It kind of reminds me what happened with Garcelle and Sutton. The women liked Garcelle, but they didn't like Sutton, and they didn't like the way that Garcelle would protect Sutton. And then when Sutton kind of turned her back on Garcelle, Garcelle didn't have anybody. She was by herself because she was too loyal to Sutton. And I think that's the same boat that Guerdy is in. You were too clicked up with Nicole when you should have been branching out to the other women on the show and getting to know them. But also the other women have to be receptive and open to getting to know Guerdy. So then Andy ends up asking, what was your reaction to their equivocation of, like, you know, other people have been dealing with people throwing things at them and you didn't have any reaction? Guerdy said there's context behind that, and we all know what part it is. So then Larsa is like, girl, you never answer the question. And then Guerdy ignores Larsa, and she was like, she's a 3-peat offender. Julia is. Julia did this thing to Marisol, but Marisol likes to conveniently forget. And Marisol said, no, I haven't forgotten, and you didn't help me either during that situation. So then Guerdy brings up, girl, at the Mamacita's luncheon, she broke a glass and she almost broke a table, and Nicole had to pay for it. And so you hear Julia said that I didn't break a glass. Girl, when they showed that footage of Julia losing her mind at that dinner, she was like, Marisol, did you say yes or no? And she starts banging that chair, and she's like grabbing her hair, and she's like, oh my God, I can't take it. Shut up. Like, she was tweaking. She was tweaking real bad. Girl, real bad. She was like, did you effing say? Did you say it? And so then she picks up the chair and she's like banging it, and everyone's just looking at her. And I'm like, Julia, you are psychotic. Okay, like, as much as you like to call somebody else psycho, you called Guerdy psycho, you called Adriana psycho, girl, that behavior right there is unhinged. Like, you threw a drink at Guerdy this season. You tried to throw a bucket of ice on Marisol. Like, I think that was the first or second season of the reboot. So maybe season 4 or season 5. Then the Mamacita's luncheon, which happened season 6. And Marisol, I don't even know why you would want to be comfortable with that lady around you, because it seems a lot of her venom and her violent behavior is towards you, girl. So then Guerdy was like, you did all of that to land a moment on TV, and you finally landed a moment on TV. So then you hear Lisa say, can we hear what Julia has to say? Can we hear what she has to say? And then Adriana's like, yeah, because why is Julia having like people speak on her behalf? And Guerdy's like, y'all, shh. And he's like, and Andy's like, yo, I'm about to ask her. Like, chill out. Okay. So then Julia says, I understand after seeing the footage how you can be re-triggered. She was like, my overreaction was a little tequila induced. That your behavior was still trash, lady. And she ends up saying there was no excuse for my behavior. She was like, nothing I do is planned. She was like, or rehearsed. It's all real. And then Guerdy said, girl, that's scary. And I said, it is too, girl. And she says, you know, I really am sorry, Guerdy. She's like, I've apologized 3 times. And then Guerdy ends up saying like, yeah, 3 times. But she was like, but you've done this behavior 3 times. Okay. And then Larsa's like, let her finish. And then Julia says again, I'm incredibly sorry. And she was just like, I am sorry from the bottom of my heart, Guerdy. And then Guerdy says, you've done this 3 times. 3 times. But then Julia says, but it's only happened 1 time between me and you. That don't mean nothing, lady. So then they start talking about Guerdy and the text message situation. And pretty much Andy was like, you know, a lot of people were annoyed with the ladies because they felt like the outrage for the text messages were overboard compared to you having a drink thrown onto you. And so Marisol was like, can I speak real quick? And then you hear Guerdy say, okay, here come the moral compass of the group. And Marisol says, you know, I took Julia to the bathroom and I told her like that was not okay, and we were mic'd up, and they actually showed behind the scenes footage of this situation where you hear Marisol take Julia into the bathroom. Julia is crying. She's like, you know, I can't believe that just happened. She's like, nobody has ever disrespected me like that. And you hear Marisol say, Julia, it's okay. You're okay. And then you hear Julia like crying profusely. And Marisol's like, listen, girl, you can't be throwing things on this show like that. And Julia's like, it wasn't for the show, Marisol, it wasn't. And Marisol's like, but listen, like moving forward, you can't do shit like that. You can't be throwing stuff at people. And Marisol was like, I was really angry at Julia for what she did to Guerdy. And she said, I also felt like it was humiliating for Guerdy to present the text message. Just, I wasn't okay with either behavior. And I think it's okay for Marisol to say that. Like, if she wasn't okay with the text messages, she wasn't okay with the drink talks. But the reactions still were disproportional to what happened. Y'all reacted very bigly to her, you know, showing the text message versus that lady throwing a drink on you. Y'all continue to have the party. Honestly, I feel like things would have been different if Guerdy would have walked away. Like, she should have left with Kiki, and she should have let it be known that she was disgusted. Like, I would have drove home how deplorable Julia's behavior was. So, next thing you know, Guerdy ends up saying the big difference between them is like they're always talking behind the scenes and saying things, but no one's ever like addressing the problem in front of me. She was like, what I would have loved if they would have put me and Julia in a room together. All of us came together and said that Julia's behavior wasn't okay and that wasn't okay. But like, besides that, that's not what happened. So then Larsa chimes in and she's like, but no, Guerdy, I did tell you and Julia, I didn't think that was okay. And they do show a flashback 2 minutes after the drink toss. You do hear Larsa say, girl, I love you, Julia, but that was not okay. We're not going to be throwing drinks on this show. And Guerdy, you did say, thank you, Larsa. Thank you. And so then Guerdy says, actions speak volumes. And she was like, inactions also speaks volumes as well. So then Alexia speaks up. She said, Guerdy, you had the same reaction last season with Larsa. And so Guerdy was like, we're not going back. So then this really pisses off Alexia. She was like, Guerdy, we listen to you talk. You gonna listen to us talk. Like, you're gonna show us respect like we showed you respect as well. Like, you gonna let us say what we got to say. And I said, oh, okay.
So Guerdy keeps
rating that like we're not going back to next season, and Alexia is like, girl, we're gonna talk about it. So then Alexia is basically saying, Guerdy, what I'm trying to say is we gave Larsa advice the same way that we gave Julia advice. We told Larsa that she needs to make it right with you. Larsa ends up saying, girl, Guerdy, you never picked up the phone. I called, I texted, I sent you flowers, and it was nothing. Mind you, Guerdy is not obligated to accept Larsa's apology or anything of that nature, but I do understand what they're trying to say is that we try behind the scenes to make sure everything's okay. But I get where Guerdy's coming from, where it's like doing it behind the scenes doesn't help me when it happens on camera. I need y'all to be present on camera with me. So then Guerdy was like, see, they doing stuff behind the scenes, Andy. And then Andy is like, well, Alexia is agreeing with you, Guerdy, that like but I don't know what Andy was trying to say, because to me, I felt like it was weird. It was weird. Like this latter half of this part of the segment, I started to get frustrated with Guerdy because I didn't like the fact that she wouldn't just land the plane. And I also didn't like the fact that she started to get snappy with Adriana. And y'all know that's saying a lot because me and Adriana, I don't see it for her. But I was like, Adriana is trying to help you get to the point and trying to get resolution that you deserve. But she was like, Guerdy is the type of person, and as a Capricorn, sometimes when we feel like we know better, we will not take other opinions. Like, we won't take other people's opinions. And I think Guerdy had gotten in her mind that once she realized that nobody cared really about the text messages in that moment because they would not go the extra mile of reading, I think she felt defeated and was just like, you know what, screw it. Let's not talk about the text messages. Like, let's focus on this one thing about the cruise. Because I was like, girl, just say what it is, you know? So Guerdy was like, see, they trying to public shame me right now. And then Stephanie was like, no one's trying to public shame you, Guerdy. No one's doing that. So then Andy was like, my question is, what did the text messages prove? And then Guerdy was like, honestly, the point of it was after multiple attempts of trying to tell these people that what Julia was saying wasn't true, I wanted to do the text messages because nobody was listening to me. So then you hear the women on the other side of the couch. I think it was Alexia and Alexia and Julia being like, girl, what did the text messages prove? Like, explain. And Guerdy was like, it proved everything, but they didn't read it. And I'm like, well, Guerdy, you know they not gonna read it, so now it's time to tell them what the text messages prove. Like, why we being stupid right now? Just say what it is, lady. And so she ends up saying, you know, they didn't want to read it because it was too long. So then Adriana was like, what it proves is that you were invited to go on the trip. You didn't beg to go on the trip. And I was like, thank you, Adriana, because that's what Adriana is telling Guerdy. And I'm like, Guerdy, just say what she just said. And just say that. And Guerdy is not wanting to listen to Adriana. She was like, tell them your point, like give them your point of view. And then Guerdy was like, well, they don't want to hear it. And Adriana was like, girl, we're at the reunion. Just reiterate your point. Just reiterate your point. So then Guerdy says, you know, I just felt unseen. You start to feel like when people don't really want to hear you, it is what it is. So then Julia is like, but what do you want it to prove to me, Guerdy? And Guerdy just was like, you know, I started to feel like I'm not a part of this group. People don't want me in this group. She was like, you know, you can't even reprimand this lady in public. And you could tell that Guerdy, I don't want to say she was spiraling, but she just like she was on a roll. You know, she was rambling. And I was like, Guerdy, Adriana just told you what to say. Just say what she said, because you're not wrong, but it's like you're losing the point because you just won't like say what it is. You know, you won't land the plane. So then Guerdy was like, you know, they're in their little clique. They don't want to listen to me. And what I say don't freaking matter. So it is what it is, you know? And so then, Julia ends up saying, what would it take for you to forgive me? Like, what will it take? So then Andy ends up saying, it seemed like you guys were in a better place and then things were good. And then next thing you know, the social media of it all started to happen. And then Guerdy ends up saying, I did move past the water thing, but further actions happened. And honestly, at the premiere party is where it really started off. And y'all, this is why we do spicy corners in the drama videos, okay? Because she referenced at the premiere party where Julia said, I want Guerdy to stay as far away from me as possible. And Guerdy is like, I thought if we were good, why would you say something like that? Like, why would you put that out there? I would just have liked it if you would have just been like, you know, we had a moment, it was bad, but we got past it. But to say something like that lets me know that we weren't past it. So then Julia starts to say, Guerdy, you just started suddenly throwing jabs at me at the final episode at the Christmas party. So she was like, you end up saying something to the effect of like, are you going to throw water on me again? So they show unforeseen footage where Julia is explaining to Marisol, Stephanie, Larsa, Alexia, and Guerdy why she feels Adriana is mad at her. She's like, I guess it's about the singing, and I think she's jealous because I'm singing opera. And then Stephanie says, what I heard from Adriana is that she's always been a singer and you just started this opera situation. So then Guerdy chimes in and she's like, girl, that's not where this initiated. Where it initiated was you were mad at her for not walking out of my cancer survivor party, and you felt some type of way. And that's when Julia was like, well, yeah, girl, because you humiliated and belittled me. And that's when Guerdy, when I tell you wrap Julia up, that's the energy Guerdy should have had at this reunion. Straight to the point and not biting, like not rambling, but she basically ends up saying, I pre-quote pro'd you, like, girl, you humiliated me, I humiliated you. And then Guerdy was like talking with her hands, and Julia was like, get your hands out of my face. And Guerdy is like, what you gonna do, throw a drink at me? There are drinks on the table. And then the camera pans to the table. I said, girl, eat her up, get her. Get her. What kind of got weird is Guerdy being like she didn't remember what happened at the final party. And I'm like, but girl, and I talked about this in the spicy corner, you referenced it in your Insta story. So do you remember it or you don't remember it? Because she was like, I'm sorry, I don't remember. So they were like, girl, at the Christmas party, because then Guerdy says we didn't have a conversation. And Julia was like, yes, we did. And, we saw the footage. So Andy was like, where do y'all go from here? Where do y'all go from here? Because Julia ends up saying, well, Guerdy, you started provoking me again. And then Guerdy was like, girl, you can't cause a storm and not think a reaction is going to happen. And Adriana on the other side of the couch is like, So Andy ends up saying, well, Guerdy, she's apologized on camera at least 5 times. Where are y'all? He reiterates, where are y'all going from here? Like, what's going to happen? And Guerdy ends up saying, well, I think I came to this place to move forward, but I need more from Julia. And you could tell everyone was starting to get annoyed with Guerdy because it's like you constantly have heard Julia apologize, but Guerdy doesn't seem like it's enough for her. And granted, she doesn't have to accept her apology. So Guerdy is just like, I don't know where we really go from here. And Julia's like, well, girl, I'm sitting in front of you. I've apologized for almost, like, this might be the 6th time. She was like, I'm here. And Guerdy was like, well, you're apologizing, but when you were on Watch What Happens Live and you said what you said with your apology, you didn't call me after that. And we talked about that in the spicy corner too. So she's just kind of like, I don't know, Julia. So then Julia tries to like flip a Uno reverse, but it didn't work. It didn't work, but especially for me, because Julia starts bringing up how like her children were under attack and how Guerdy was helping spread the hatred towards her and her family, because Guerdy made a post about the boys changing their names or them changing the boys' names. And they showed the the Instagram comment where she said, I never judge Martina for saying she has done in public. I, let alone never question them for renaming their adoptive kids. So that doesn't sound like to me a chastising them for changing their children's name, even though I think that's messed up. Like, why did you feel the need to do that? It starts to feel like you're trying to erase like their origin, and I don't like that, okay? And so Julia is like, well, we consulted child psychologists, and Guerdy is like, girl, I don't remember talking about your kids or shaming you. So then Larsa is like, kids are off limits, and Guerdy reiterates like, girl, I don't remember doing that. And I'm like, Guerdy, you didn't do it. You didn't do it. So Julia ends up saying, you know what, but I'm here to move forward. And Guerdy's like, I'm here as well. But she was like, I didn't start this fight. I didn't start this fight, let alone, I don't really even know what the issue of the fight is. So then she was like, can you at least admit that this wasn't about the cruise? And Julia says, no, it was not about the cruise, Guerdy. The cruise happened 2 years ago. But then Guerdy says, but you took the opportunity to make it about that. So then Julia's like, Guerdy, can we move forward? Honestly, I think Julia was on that cruise cheating on Martina. I do. I think Julia asked Guerdy to be there to like cover for her, and I'm starting to think she was doing extracurricular activities with another person, and that's what it is. So Julia reiterates, I'm here. It's been 8 months since we've seen each other. Like, I have a desire to move forward with you. You know, I like, what do you want me to do? Get on my knees and beg you? And then Guerdy was like, well, you called me psychopath scary. Like, and then Julia was like, Guerdy, I apologize for that. And then she keeps bringing up, like, we haven't talked to each other in 8 months. But then Guerdy was like, girl, there was no reason why you should have met me with so much anger. Like, I never texted you I hated you. I've never said I'm not speaking to you again. Like, I don't understand it. So then Julia ends up saying, I'm sorry, Guerdy, that I hurt you. And she was like, I really would like to move forward. So, and she was like, the cruise was 2 years ago. And then you hear Adriana on the side saying, tell her she needs to admit that the cruise was a big deal. And then you hear Guerdy be like, girl, it's not about that anymore. It's not about that, to Adriana. And then Andy's like, so what do you want for her? What do you want for her? And then Guerdy was like, I'm not putting band-aids and walk on things and walking away. So then Larsa was like, what do you want her to do? Do you want to bully her? And I was like, Larsa, shut the hell up. Shut up. Be quiet. And she already ends up saying, I want to move forward and give you another shot, but like, I don't know. So then Andy was just like, it's clear that we're not going to get anywhere for tonight. And Guerdy was like, no, because it's very complicated. It's really complicated. So he was like, hopefully y'all can find some type of resolution. So then they break to take a break, and you hear Adriana say, Guerdy, you're taking the bait. Like, you're letting them off too easy and you're not checking them for their lies. Like, you should have let her know it was about the cruise. But at this point, Guerdy is over it. She was like, you're not understanding me, Adriana. She was like, Adriana, please just let it go. Let it go. I'm telling you, let it go. So then we don't see them on screen. We see that they're having like an off-screen conversation where you hear Guerdy say, oh my God, Adriana, like, let it go. And you hear Adriana say, but I'm trying to help you. And she was like, Guerdy's like, it's not about the details anymore. It's not about the details. Nobody cares about the cruise. Like, I promise you, maybe you're too heated right now. We'll let it go. And I was like, Guerdy, she's trying to help you. And if I was Adriana, I would never try to help Guerdy at no reunion ever again. Because what you're not going to do is make it seem like I'm being irrational and erratic when I can see you're not landing the plane and you're not getting your point across, and also you're not checking somebody who lied on you for 8 months. Like, she was just trying to help, girl. That's it. That's all. The next segment we have is all about Stephanie, and it went by pretty fast, if you ask me. So they run Stephanie's package. We find out that the glitter on her dress stained the couch, so that's a mess. They asked a viewer question that was like, Stephanie seems to lead with her wealth, and everyone's like, yes, she does. And Stephanie, another person says Stephanie does the most. Stephanie goes on to say that, like, great example, when people win Super Bowls, they get Super Bowl rings, and it shows a signifying of like they made the right decisions, they put in the work. So that's what it means to me when I talk about my plane and all this stuff, that I made the right decisions and made the right choices. But then you hear Larsa say, but they work a lot too. Like, they work like 7 days a week. But I'm also like, girl, still, it is tacky and off-putting after a while, Stephanie. So Stephanie was just like, at the end of the day, I'm proud of what I've accomplished. So it is what it is. They then start talking about Stephanie's like tone and demeanor. And Stephanie basically says, I did learn from being here that I do say things very harshly, even though I don't mean them to come off that way. But she's like, I am in a male-dominated field, so that is just how it is for me. So moving forward, I'm going to try to like work on that. They then asked Stephanie, like, what else is something that you've learned about yourself? And she was like, I realized that friendships can't be transactional. You hear Guerdy say, me too. And then Julia makes a face like, mind you, I'm gonna be honest, Guerdy was starting to get on my nerves with constantly like the side conversations, because it wasn't just with Stephanie, it was when other people were talking, and I was like, Guerdy, like, keep just a little bit. So she ends up saying that she really realized that she gives her all and she does love really hard. So then they asked her, like, would you hire anybody on this show to work for Shoma? And she was like, no. And she was like, I learned by working with my sisters, when you love somebody, you should not allow them to work for you because it can be disastrous. So then Andy says, based off of that answer, how are you doing with your sisters? And she was like, honestly, not so good. Not so good. She basically was like, I realized, she was like, I realized that, like, I can be a tough piece of cake. Basically, she the problem. They do ask her about Nicole and her relationship with her. She's like, girl, we're associates. They ask her about Anthony. What are the similarities between Anthony and Masood? And she was like, they're alpha men. And then they asked Guerdy, do you think Anthony and Stephanie would still be together? And she was like, yeah, it would work. So they continue on with Stephanie's package, and they start talking about the Reddit post that we talked about in the Spicy Corner, where they were alleging that Stephanie was Masood's ex-wife's assistant and basically his mistress. And she was like, girl, I've been clearing up this rumor like since the beginning. She was like, I can't believe it gained so much traction. So she was like, me and Masood did meet at a basketball game. She basically said that she has never met his ex-wife, and that Masood was separated for 8 years before he ever, started talking to her. So she was like, I've never met the wife. I don't have any pictures with her. And we do know Masood has children, but I think they might be around Stephanie's age or maybe a little bit younger. It seems like Masood and his ex-wife's relationship was very contentious, and he don't really want Stephanie around her, and Stephanie is okay with that. Adriana pipes up and she's like, well, she did see her when we went to lunch, and we find out that Stephanie got like shook when she saw the ex-wife. She was like, girl, there goes Masood's ex-wife. But Adriana said, she said, there goes Masood's wife. And Stephanie pointed out, I said ex-wife, girl, get it right. And she was like, Stephanie was like, block me, block me, block me. I don't know why she would be scared of that lady or not wanting confrontation, unless there was some overlappage between Masood and Stephanie, or if Masood really did do that lady dirty in the divorce. I don't know. But I wouldn't be scared of nobody's ex-partner. I wouldn't. So it says that I hope my sisters watch the show so they can see it's not just them, that I'm this way with everybody, because I have problems with all of my friends. But she was like, one thing I didn't expect was to actually really love all the women on this show. I didn't think that I would walk away with that. So we get away from Stephanie's package. They end up asking Lisa, how is everything going on with her? She talks about how the divorce did actually change her. She feels like she's more assertive after dealing with the humiliation with Lenny. And they ask her, like, are you and Jody, like, when is that going to happen? When are y'all going to get married? She does this. Everyone freaks out and they're like, oh my God, girl. Like, are y'all getting married? And then she's like, no, it's not happening yet. And then Stephanie was like, she manifesting. They go on to talk about the Martina surrogacy comment, which I was actually surprised that they brought it up. We find out that Lisa had her 2 children by surrogacy, and she was like, yeah, I felt some type of way. She was like, I was actually surprised that Martina didn't retract her comment. And Julia was like, well, we talked about it. She took the comment down, and I do not agree with what she said. I absolutely don't agree about it. So then they start to talk to Julia about, the adoption and everything. And they're like, we saw you asking your friend Derek to be the godfather. Was Adriana in the running to be a godparent? And she was like, no. And I said, ooh. And Adriana was like, wow, like dagger to my heart. And I said, girl, really? And it made it worse because we find out that Adriana wrote 2 character statements for them during the adoption process. Girl, Julia is a user, a horrible user. Oh my gosh. And so she's like, wow, for real, girl? And so Adriana was just like, I gave 2 character statements when they needed it, even when they were having their home visits. And she was like, she's the godmother of my dog. And everyone was like, girl, that's different. And I mean, it is different, but we know how much Adriana loves her dog. So I do think she took like time and consideration into like picking someone to watch over her animal if in case she wasn't able to, be here for that dog. And she was just like, it hurt. Like, she was like, that really hurts. So then they end up paying their package. They do that weird proposal that they did back in 2021 with each other. And Andy ends up saying, it's kind of crazy that you guys are here where y'all are at right now. So what, like, why is that the case? pretty much after they run their friendship package, Andy ends up saying, like, again, like, why are y'all where y'all at? Can I assume that it's because Julia is now friends with Alexia and Marisol? Adriana tries to speak and Julia tries to cut her off, and Adriana's like, girl, he asked me a question. So then finally, Adriana says, no, I had no problems with her being friends with Alexia. The issue came when she was friends with Marisol, because she started to change, and she was like, I feel like Marisol was instigating things. Marisol's like, why are you blaming me for this? She was like, girl, take like ownership of your actions. And I will say this, I don't like how they always try to blame Marisol for other people's actions, saying she's behind the scenes. Granted, she could be behind the scenes, but the truth of the matter is Julia is a grown ass adult. Like, if I've been locked in with my friends for over like 2 decades or like several years, there's a bunch of nothing that somebody new could say about you if my relationship with you is strong. So even if Marisol was saying something, the onus is still on Julia for the way that she behaved and reacted towards you. Like, you can't put that all on Marisol. So then Andy was like, well, Julia, do you have like a response to that? And Julia ends up saying this. She was like, well, I feel like I can bring clarity as to why we are where we at with Adriana. Mind you, she put we in there, like, and looked at Alexia and Marisol. And I'm like, why are you looking at them? Like, this is your relationship with Adriana. So this we, because they didn't even know what she was going to say, because everyone was gagged after Julia says, you know, in the Hamptons, me and Adriana slept together. Everybody was like, girl, what? Andy was like, what you mean? Like, and you could tell that Julia was pissed. I'm going to be honest, not Julia, Adriana was pissed. I'm going to be honest, I believe that they slept together. That friendship proposal was weird. It was. It gave very much like, girl, I'm in love with you and I want you to know it. On top of that, I'm not really sure why Julia thinks that's the reason their relationship has deteriorated, unless that they've been bumping coochies for a long time and she stopped doing it with Adriana and that's why she pissed off. But I don't understand how Julia is going to work this into like the narrative. And what I mean by that is, how are you going to explain this is the reason why Adriana is behaving this way? Like, even though I think they did that, but I'm like, did you just blow up your marriage for reality TV? Because I saw the sneak peek and Julia basically was saying that she thought Adriana was going to throw that out there when they were arguing at the Christmas party. But Adriana is acting like that's not what she was going to say. So now I'm just like, girl, this is shenanigans. And I will give Andy and Bravo credit. I was not expecting Julia to say that, so I was gagged. I believe it and I was gagged. But that's all I got for you guys today. As always, remember to be bravely authentic. Definitely hop down in the comments below and subscribe. And I'm out, y'all. Deuces.